Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be showing you how I use the clamshells from a previous video to create this applique wall hanging. This could even be the centre of a quilt, but I've decided to leave it at this point and turn it into a wall hanging. So if you're interested in a little process video, then do stay tuned. So the first thing I did was downloaded a applique pattern or shape from Pinterest. I'll leave the link to the specific one that I used in the description below, but I just cut it out and played around with the layout because I wanted to extend it a little bit. And then with my clamshells, I marked a stitching line for my Needleturn applique, which I did. I used the template mentioned in the previous video, which again I'll link below, and a heat erasable pen just to mark along this top edge. The heat erasable pen was difficult to see on this dark blue fabric, I do have to admit, but I did manage to figure that out in the end. And then I put down the clamshells first of all, just so I could see where I wanted everything positioned. I used a little bit of Alma's glue just to give it a little bit of a temporary tack down, and then I went in and put some pins once I made sure it was all pressed down and in the right position that I wanted. Once I had done this, I then actually started drawing out the rest of the applique shapes onto the fabric that I wanted, and then pinning and gluing very slightly into place. Now it's just a very thin applique stitch that I used alongside the regular polyester thread that I like to use. And I started with the item that would be in the background, so the stems, and then I went on to the leaves and the flowers. But once the stems was in place, I could do the clamshells because those overlapped the stems. I've used a mixture of Liberty quilting cottons here. I had a fat 1/8 bundle of these blues, and then I've mixed in some Liberty Tarnalawn to create the flowers and stems, which I think the Tarnalawn is really easy to use when doing Needleturn applique because it's quite thin and there's not a lot of bulk to it, so you don't have to worry about there being bulk in the applique. So here I am just laying everything out and just messing around with the layout that I want. And you can see what I do is I put the shape onto the right side of the fabric and I draw around the shape with my friction heat erasable pen. I then cut around that shape, leaving around a 1/4 inch seam allowance. It doesn't have to be too neat because all of this is going to get tucked underneath that red line that you've just drawn. I decided to put this leaf here because my stem was a bit wonky in that place, so the leaf really helped just camouflage that. So that's a handy tip. If you've got anything that goes wrong in applique, cover it up with another piece. But I do find that doing flowers and things that occur in nature, you don't have to be too precise with it because obviously a stem in nature will be curved. So if you're new to applique, that's what I would say. Start with maybe flower designs or something that would naturally have a little bit of a curve or a bend to it if you make any wonkies. So I decided to finish off the wall hanging with a scalloped clamshell border around the edge. I just chose a selection of the fabrics that I've used throughout the whole panel. I had one left over there, and I had a little bit of scraps, and I found this really tiny cutting blade, what do you call that, a rotary cutter. And it's great for getting in around the shapes. Wow, until I had this little fail here. I thought this scrap was the perfect size. I was like, yep, that is great, I can use up all of this. It was folded in half, so I thought, right, okay, I'm just going to cut around that with my little rotary cutter. And then because the underside of the clamshell is actually quite hard to get the rotary blade around, I thought, wow, I'll just go and do it myself. No, that doesn't work. Look how lopsided that was. So that just went straight into the scraps pile. So this is how I did it. Obviously just be careful of your fingers if you've got one of those rotating cutting mats. It is best to use, but always cut away, not like I have here. There we go. Bit neater. Doesn't matter that the edge isn't too smooth, because like I say, it's all going to get turned underneath anyway. So this is the final border that I need to do, and I'm just laying out the clamshells. I tried not to put any duplicates too close to each other, so you'll see here that I'm just messing around with the layout and cutting out bits and pieces. And then again here I'm just using a little bit of Alma's purple glue just to tack it down in the middle, just so nothing moves in between now and when I attach my pins. This dries clear, it doesn't leave any type of residue, and it's a cheaper substitute for the sew line glue because I find that a little bit expensive. You can generally get multi-packs of these Alma's glue for fairly cheap on Amazon, even if you're in the UK. And then I've also invested in these tiny applique pins. These are wonderful, so much better than bigger pins. And have you ever tried to thread a needle this small through a camera lens? I was glad I did it on about the third attempt. I like to do a quilter's knot, so if you're not familiar, you take the opposite end of the thread, put it round the needle, hold it tight and twist your thread around the needle 3 or 4 times, and then just pull that twist all the way down your needle, and then at the end you'll have a knot. Just like that. I always leave that tail. I don't worry about trimming the tail off, especially with this type of thing. And then just to show you the technique again, I just turn it under with my needle and just do a tiny little stitch. Most of the stitch is actually visible on the rear of the work rather than on the front. The background that I've used on the border and on the main body of the panel is like this really subtle honeycomb design. Did you see there? It was like fishing, and I pulled in my my pin cushion. So then I attached the borders by machine. I didn't actually film any of that because I'm not very good on the machine. It's quite nerve-wracking. But I was really pleased with how it all came out in the end. So here is some footage after giving everything a good press. I think that's coming up in a moment. This clearly isn't pressed. So yeah, I'm really happy. It's just the binding and some quilting to do now, but I am just going to park this project until the new year so that I can do some Christmas sewing. So do stay tuned for some of the Christmas sewing, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and you take care.